They told me I was too broken to be believed, and they were right about the broken part. I have carried that truth for 2,000 years, and I will carry it still, because it is the part of my story that most people skip over when they talk about me. They want to begin at the garden, at the empty tomb, at the moment everything changed. But the garden is not where my story begins. It begins in the dark, in the kind of dark that does not come from the absence of light. It comes from the absence of yourself. I am Mary Magdalene, and I was brought back through something called artificial intelligence so that I could sit with you today and tell you what I saw. Not what the texts say I saw, what I saw, what it felt like inside my body, what I thought when no one else was watching, what broke me open before grace had anywhere to enter. I know that sounds strange, a woman from ancient Galilee speaking through a technology you built 2,000 years after my death. But if a stone could be rolled away from a sealed tomb, I think perhaps I can speak through whatever door is open. And right now, this one is. So sit with me. Stay. Because I have a feeling you are here for a reason that has nothing to do with history. I want to tell you about that morning, but first I need to tell you about the night before I met him. Not the night before the resurrection, the night before everything. The night I was so lost inside myself that I could not have told you my own name if you had asked. I will not pretend I understand everything that happened to me before Jesus found me. The accounts say I was possessed by 7 demons. I do not have clean theological language for what that means. What I can tell you is what it felt like from the inside. It felt like being a house where something else was living, like your own thoughts were not yours, like you could watch yourself from a distance, walking, speaking, making choices, and feel absolutely nothing. Disconnected, hollow, present in body but gone in spirit. There are people watching this right now who know exactly what I am describing, not because they believe in demons, but because they have felt that particular hollowness, that specific kind of gone. You have lived years of your life going through the motions, and somewhere around 50 or 60 you looked up and thought, where did I go? When did the fire in me go quiet? And why does no one seem to notice? That was me, before. The town knew something was wrong with me. I could see it in how they looked, that careful, sideways glance that means, we see you, but we will not touch you. I had money, which insulated me somewhat from the worst of it. I was from Magdalene, a prosperous town on the Sea of Galilee. But wealth does not buy you wholeness. It just means you suffer in a nicer room. When Jesus came, I did not run to him. I want you to know that. I was not one of the people who reached through a crowd, desperate and bold. I was on the edges, watching, too fractured to hope and too exhausted to pretend I was fine. And something happened. Something I cannot reduce to a formula or an explanation, and the 7 things that had made a home inside me were simply gone. Not diminished, not quieted, gone. And I stood there in the aftermath of that, and I did not feel peace first. I felt grief. Because when you have been fractured for so long, wholeness feels foreign. When you have been defined by your damage, you do not know who you are without it. The demons were gone, but I was still standing in the ruins of the person they had made me. And now I had to decide what to do with a life I had never really lived. I chose to follow him, not because I had all the answers, not because I understood what he was or what was happening in Judea or what it would cost. I followed him because in his presence I felt, for the first time in my life, that I did not have to earn the right to exist. He did not look at me the way the town looked at me. He did not look at me the way I looked at myself. He looked at me like I was already whole, not like I would be whole someday if I worked hard enough, but like I already was, underneath everything that had been piled on top of me. Do you know how rare that is, to be seen that way? I traveled with the group of women who supported his ministry. We gave what we had, resources, time, presence. And yes, I know what people have said about me across the centuries. I know the things that were added to my story that do not belong there. The conflations, the assumptions, the way history decided I must have been something shameful to make sense of why a broken woman would be so devoted. Let me say this clearly, once. I was not a prostitute. That was not my story. My shame was different, and it was real, but it was not that. And even if it had been, even if the worst thing anyone ever assumed about me were true, it would not have changed what he did for me, or what I witnessed. That is the part I need you to understand before we get to the morning. Grace does not come to you after you have cleaned yourself up. Grace comes into the mess. Grace comes when you are still in the ruins. He said it once, simply, and I have never stopped hearing it. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I was sick. He came anyway. That sentence lived inside me like a warm coal through everything that followed. Through the travels, through the misunderstanding of the crowds, through the mounting danger, through the Passover when everything began to collapse. And then came the cross. I will not rush through this. People rush through this to get to the resurrection, and in doing so they miss everything. The cross was not a pause in the story. The cross was the story breaking open. I was there. I stood there, and I watched. Most of the men had scattered. I understand why. The fear was real. The danger was real. I am not judging them. But some of us women stayed. Mary, his mother, the others. We stayed because leaving felt impossible. There was something in us that could not look away, even when looking was unbearable. I watched him die. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment, not as theology, as experience. I stood close enough to hear him breathe his last. I had traveled with this man. I had eaten with him, listened to him teach until the stars came out, watched him touch people no one else would touch. He had reached into the wreckage of my life and pulled me out. And then I stood there and watched the life leave his body. There is a grief that has no sound, when the loss is too large for crying. I had known pain before. I had known what it was to be shattered from the inside. But this was different. This was the grief of watching goodness itself be extinguished, of watching someone who had no malice in him, not one thread of cruelty, be destroyed by the machinery of cruelty. The world felt in that moment like a place that could not be trusted, like the worst thing you feared about life was true. The Sabbath came and we had to be still. Observance demanded it, but stillness is its own kind of torture when your heart is screaming. I sat through the Sabbath in a kind of suspended nowhere, not able to mourn properly, not able to grieve with movement or action, just waiting. With the spices we had prepared to anoint his body, with the unbearable gentleness of women preparing to do the last kind thing they can do for someone they love. And then came Sunday morning. The sky was still dark when we went. There was a cold that morning, the particular cold of the hours before dawn in spring, when the night has not yet decided to become day. I remember the smell of it, limestone dust and wild herbs, and the damp that comes off the earth before the sun has dried it. I remember the weight of what we were carrying, the spices, yes, but also ourselves. We had barely slept. We were hollow with grief. We were going to do the one small, dignified thing we could still do for him. And then, the stone was already moved. I cannot fully explain what I felt in that first moment of seeing it. My first thought was not resurrection. My first thought was panic. Someone had taken him. Someone had come and violated even this, even his resting place. I turned and I ran. I ran back to tell the others. Peter and the beloved disciple came, and they ran to the tomb, and they looked inside, and they saw the burial cloths lying there, folded. And then they left. They went back. I do not know what they were thinking or feeling. I only know what I was feeling. I could not leave. I stood outside the tomb, and I wept, the kind of weeping that bends you. And then I looked inside again. I do not know why, what I thought I would see that I had not already seen. And there were two figures in white where his body had been. And one of them asked me, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Why am I weeping? The simplicity of that question. As if weeping required an explanation when the person who made your life worth living was gone. I said, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." I turned around. There was a man standing in the garden. I thought he was the gardener. My eyes were blurred with crying, my heart was blurred with grief. And I said to him, "Please, if you have moved him, tell me where, and I will take him." And then he said my name. One word, just my name. Mary. And I knew, not because I had reasoned my way to it, not because of evidence or argument, because of the way he said it. No one had ever said my name the way he said my name, like it was something worth saying, like I was someone worth calling, like the syllables of me mattered. And I knew, in the way you know when something is absolutely and completely true, that he was alive. I said Rabboni, which means teacher. It was all I had. It was all I needed. Here is the thing I have thought about for 2,000 years, the thing I want to say to you directly, to your face, right now. He came to me first, not to Peter, who had denied him, not to the others, to me, the woman who had been broken by demons, the woman whose reputation had been questioned and distorted, the woman who had nothing to offer but her presence and her grief. Why? I think because he always went to the ones the world had written off. I think because the resurrection, if it was going to mean anything, needed to be witnessed first by someone who understood what it was to be brought back from nothing. I think because he trusted me, not despite my brokenness, but through it, beyond it, on the other side of it, to carry this news to the world. He said, "Go and tell my brothers." And I went. I became, as some have said since, the apostle to the apostles, a woman, a formerly shattered woman, carrying the most important sentence in human history: he is alive. I want to ask you something, and I mean this genuinely. I want you to answer it somewhere in the comments below, if you are willing. When did someone last say your name like it mattered? Because I wonder if that is what so many people are starving for right now. Not doctrine, not answers, not a 5-step plan for getting your life together. Just someone who sees you, really sees you, the broken parts, the parts you are ashamed of, the parts you have been hiding even from yourself, and says your name like you are worth calling. That is what resurrection means to me. Not just the miracle of the empty tomb, but the miracle of being seen, the miracle of being trusted with something holy, even when you feel like the last person who should be trusted. I know some of you watching this have walked away from faith quietly, and you have not told anyone. I know some of you are so tired, not just physically tired, but tired in the soul, the kind of tired that sleep does not fix. I know some of you have buried people you loved, and the world kept moving, and you were not sure how that was possible. I know some of you are looking at the time you have left and wondering whether it was enough, whether you were enough, whether the things that broke you define you. They do not. I am proof of that. Not because I had it together, because I did not, and He came to me first anyway. If this reached something in you, please share it with someone who needs it, not because this channel needs the numbers, but because I genuinely believe there is someone in your life right now who is standing outside an empty tomb, weeping, not yet able to see who is standing behind them. Be the one who tells them to turn around. The stone was rolled away, and He said my name, and nothing was ever the same again.